Thank you. Please sit down. Welcome back, Synod. We resume our debate on item 22. So do I see anyone standing? Can I call Anil Apadu, please? And Jane Rossum, thank you. The speech limit's still 5 minutes.
Anil Apadu, 485 GMH Co-option. Chair, thank you for calling me. I support this motion and am so grateful to Synod for enthusiastically supporting this last year. In this speech, I'd like to share some of my reflections as someone for whom this motion was created, a working class member of the clergy. I was raised in a poor area of Kent, known as Medway. Like Bishop Lim, we have our own ditty. If Kent is the Garden of England, Medway Towns is the compost heap. I grew up going to St Francis Church in Strood, a church that was empty most of the year round, but full of festival services. Sadly, my education left a lot to be desired. I remember my deputy head of our secondary school saying to all the Year 7 intakes on our first day of school, "You are the last hope for this school." I left school and took up a string of diverse jobs over the next 10 years, and I thrived. I ran a restaurant with 40 staff, I ran a travel company, and I worked in a recruitment desk. Like many working class people, I was entrepreneurial, dynamic, outgoing, and a risk taker. And yet I found the discernment process in the Church of England full of frustrating barriers. In my experience, as someone of GMH background, by God's grace, I've not experienced racism in the Church of England, and my skin was much darker as a child. But I have experienced classism, a lack of a degree being seen as a lack of intelligence. My biggest disadvantage is that I don't come from a book culture. At Bible college, I found reading tough, not because I couldn't read, but because I wasn't used to the kind of literature I was now expected to read and enjoy. But having said that, I thrived at Bible college and was really nurtured where I was. There is a myth that working class people are dumb, have short attention spans, and are easily distracted by shiny objects. Friends, it's not true. One pastor, a guy called Duncan Forbes, he taught his council estate biblical Hebrew. And he often preached for 45 minutes to an hour, and they loved every minute of it. For working class people, the issue isn't that we can't learn, but we often learn in different ways. So I want to make 3 simple appeals to those on the committee. Firstly, please don't confuse a lack of a degree for a lack of intelligence. In a desire to make theological training more accessible, please don't forsake academic rigor. You may be aware that Archbishop Cranmer retained the black cassock because it was a dress of the academy, and it demonstrated the need for ministers of the word to be properly trained. So please properly train ministers of the word. Secondly, please lower the barriers to entering ministry and remove what I experience as hurdles established on the basis of class rather than discernment. My final comment highlights an uncomfortable truth, and in line with Bishop Mark's appeal earlier on, this isn't intended to be divisive, but I want to say it. Friends, last Christmas, some bishops and churches spoke overwhelmingly in opposition to the Unite the Kingdom carol service for a variety of reasons. We need to acknowledge that in those remarks, they were in fact condemning many of the kinds of people this motion is trying to give a voice to. I'm not giving a view either way on the rights or wrongs of the organisers of that service, but more an appeal to our church to speak well of those whose views might differ to us on a variety of things. Often the priorities and issues that concern working class people are quite different to some of the things that we discuss in this chamber. We need to be prepared as a synod to embrace them and their views. Embrace me and my views, and highlight the needs that affect many people who live in this land. Please support this motion.
Jane Rossum, Rochester 389. Synod, I really welcome and support this motion. However, in reading the response paper, I noted the main barriers to training were very often the overly academic nature of training and financial challenges. And both of these things rang huge bells with me and could have been significant barriers in my own journey. I will never forget the look on my archdeacon's face when we discussed my academic background. because I was very proud to tell her that I just recently gained certificates at Agricultural College for machinery repair and fabrication and welding. But now, both absolutely essential in my job as a farmer, and luckily she and God thought they were as well for lay ministry, because I was able to proceed with my training application. Coming from a small rural church, which at the time was in vacancy and had a few financial resources, I wrote a personal cheque to accompany that application. I then spent the next 2 years travelling 31 miles each way every Tuesday evening and some Saturdays, all at my own expense. I then personally bought all the course books, as well as the others that I needed to give me the context. I also purchased a laptop and a printer to churn out all those essays. And now, I know I was fortunate that I was able to find the funds for my calling, but I saw others struggle, and at least one of my cohort didn't make it because these difficulties became barriers. And barriers particularly for lay ministry. And as the report highlights, there is no national standard of financial provision. Any resources to help access to lay ministry training are individual local provisions, absolutely ad hoc. And here we are at a time when we need lay ministry more than ever due to low clergy numbers, which have resulted in very high parish vacancies numbers in my own archdeaconries and diocese. And finally, when I was licensed at the cathedral, that day of joy and celebration was slightly tempered by the fact that I had to bring my own Bible for the bishop to give back to me. I certainly didn't feel the love or very valued with that obvious lack of investment in me and my future ministry. And whilst it's all very well sometimes to slip into the pews in my kind of all-weather farming gear, that really wasn't suitable for leading morning worship. So once again, the piggy bank was raided for a further few £100 for a cassock, a surplice and an alb. But luckily, my dear friend and former Synod member, Clive Billinus, gave me his blue silk scarf when he retired. Now, further post-licensing training, including becoming an Anna chaplain and then funeral ministry. And I was fortunate that the vicar of a neighbouring parish was at the same height as me, and so she lent me her cape when I needed it for winter funerals in our big old rural graveyards in freezing cold weather. A low point came for me when she moved and I had to find another one. And the other neighbouring vicar was 5'2". And the only option seemed to be for me to buy one. And I discovered they were literally hundreds of pounds. Now, I was on a diocesan training day and I had a little meltdown. I said, do I really have to bankrupt myself? I wailed. Thankfully, one of a very kind and inspired senior clergy went off to Malling Abbey, and the nuns there offered me one from their store. Now, I'll always treasure it, but lay ministry really should not be so under-resourced. It's not a good look, and it doesn't make lay ministry attractive or look at all valued by the church. So please, please, while I wholeheartedly support this and the future national strategy, please support and enable working class lay ministry too. Thank you.
I'd like to call Adam Beaumont, please, and then Chantal Noppen. Thank you. The speech limit's still 5 minutes. Thank you.
Adam Beaumont, 73, Bristol. Thank you, Chair, for calling me as a debutante, I think that might be the right word, in this chamber. I speak in favour of this motion and from a place of gratitude for the work that has already been done. This is good news, and a thank you to all who have been involved up and down the country. Bristol is a diocese which is deeply invested in our working class communities across Bristol and Swindon. 100% of our link funding goes to the right places. I'd love to see your workings, Archbishop's Council, plus an ongoing strategic investment of over £800,000 per year into our very most deprived communities. This includes grassroots discernment of ministry, as well as discipleship, training, and vocations. Our homegrown prepared course being some of the latest fruit, giving local participants the potential opportunity to become commissioned urban missioners. The 4 comments I wish to offer to the debate originate from our Dean of Priority Communities, our Priority Community Network trainer, and our Diocesan Director of Ordinance, for whose input to this I am very grateful. 1, in our experience, working class clergy happily identify as such, deeply valued, rather than seen as something to be shaken off. However, alongside this, the reality of their lived experience, particularly at TEIs and in becoming embedded in the institution of the church, is when they feel judged. We contend that addressing the underlying culture, addressing the preconceptions and the bias that exist in the institution must be the key focus in moving this work forward. We disagree with the generalization that there is poor prior education of working class clergy. One working class colleague from whom I learned a lot in this area was Oxbridge educated before training for ordination. The danger we know of labels, particularly broad brush ones, is that it reinforces these existing biases, which are indeed the greater problem. Regarding deployability of ministers and the problem of potentially lost generational social housing, we see this as a broader problem. And we know that there are many who have to sell their prior homes, or worse, were made to, and cannot get back onto the property ladder or afford rent at retirement. This is a wider systemic question for any deployable minister, of which, of course, the specifics here are an important part. And finally, from our experience, we just question the idea that lack of representation is the biggest cause of fewer vocations. We see that the process is the biggest hurdle. The paperwork, the discernment framework, and those things we've heard about already, those surrounding expectations, those are the things that need more attention in order that those hurdles might be lessened. Nonetheless, with these comments in mind, we wholeheartedly support this motion and recognize the hope of a greater diversity in our church in every way. After all, our God was a Nazarene, was a carpenter, was mistaken for a gardener, and he called fishermen before he called a tax collector. This motion can only strengthen the church. Please support it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Chantal.
Nope. Yep. Okay. Chantal Noppen at 108 Durham. It's probably not a huge surprise to, well, any of you that I wholeheartedly support this motion, and I'm really excited by the strategy. I think it's encouraging, astute, and bold. But I think what needs to happen is that we all need to actually listen to it in its layers. Because if we fail to acknowledge and mitigate for the complex realities that are barring people from realizing their vocation, we risk losing so much, as we already have done. So let's be bold and proactive in how we respond, because I think the biggest problem, church, is us. Basically, I'm going to say this straight, we need to get over ourselves. If we don't see how much we need to change, we're either not asking the right questions or we're simply not listening. The Church of England far too often assumes that its way is best, the only way. I see it in who we think belongs. I see it in the way we engage with others and in our quiet but persistent superiority complexes, our embedded snobbery and Orwellian elitism, the conformity that we demand and encourage. In the voices and advice that we ignore, the attitudes demonstrated towards tattoos, regional accents, and turns of phrase. We encourage conformity rather than embracing the richness of difference. Instead of supporting people to grow in the calling that God has placed on their hearts, we pressure them to conform to what we think clergy, ministers, or lay leaders should be. Too often, we hold up the occasional bootstrap champion success story, as that means we're doing it okay, rather than addressing the embedded gatekeeping that is still keeping so many out. I want to tell you, I have a theory here. Coffee. Many church circles assume that proper coffee means filter coffee. Good coffee is proper coffee is filter coffee. And they instantly dismiss instant as inferior. I suspect lots of us have done that. But why do we seem to think we need to turn folk into drinking proper, real coffee? This is exactly what we do with working class vocations. We treat people as something to be refined until they fit our existing models, rather than supporting folk to grow into themselves as they are. We've got to fund and resource vocations radically and imaginatively. We must broaden who and what we value and how we show that. We've got to stop looking down on those who do things or learn best differently. Difference is not lesser. When we lift others, we rise too. This is true in all areas of inclusion. So make no mistake, when we assume superiority, we diminish ourselves too. When we demand conformity, we diminish God's beautiful, eclectic, diverse creation. The church has often made it clear I should not be here, but God repeatedly tells me otherwise. So let us encourage and enable all to rise up with a song of their hearts they've been given to sing, because there should be a place and a path for everyone to travel in finding and growing into their vocation, of which we all have one, to which there should be equitable access. We need to be bold in broadening who and what we value. May we have the wisdom and grace to live that out, and the willingness to adapt, even ourselves, dear church, to broaden the ways we identify, nurture, and encourage vocations, who and what we value. I'm often told when I ask people, would you like to do this? Could you, maybe? Oh, I'm just a mum, a teacher. I'm just a mechanic. And I often say, well, you can think that, but hear me when I say there is no just a in God's economy, but there is justice. I don't think I will ever forget being asked during my curacy, which I served in Byker Newcastle, yes, Byker Grove there, presenting with some of my congregation to our deanery synod, might have been Diocesan, I didn't know, not sure, on bedroom tax and the impact of that was having on my community. They all listened obediently, and then afterwards one of the clergy colleagues said to me, "But Chantal, how do you speak to those people?" I thought they were joking. They weren't. They could not comprehend how I spoke to those people. In no way do I get everything right. I can give you a list if you want, but you've probably got your own. But I am only human, and God has made it, as I've said, relentlessly clear I'm meant to be here. So can we please love, value, and welcome us, all of us, as we are, whether we've got linen jackets, drink proper coffee, or talk posh, or not.
I'm going to change a speech limit to 3 minutes, and I'll take Bishop Joanne Grenfell and Rob Sutherland, and then I'll be looking to Zoom. We've got 2 speakers on Zoom.
Joanne Grenfell, Bishop of St Edmundsbury in Ipswich 35. I'm very supportive of this work, and I particularly appreciate the careful data-based approach that it takes in collecting essential information that can allow us to understand more. We need to remove the systemic barriers to full participation. But just a small plea. In this and other work, can we please stop talking about or living on estates? In the 1970s, new build housing in Teesside, where I grew up, a place of fairly low income and a comprehensive school with, at that time, a bit of a difficult reputation, an estate was either a car with a big boot or the place on Emmerdale Farm where the posh people went grouse shooting. It wasn't how we described where we lived. It wasn't how we saw ourselves. Even the prepositions are revealing. People, it seems, live in a village or in a town, but on an estate, like grouse. And people who experience poverty don't always live in clearly defined areas, conveniently delineated to enable us to other and then minister to them. Indeed, some poverty is barely visible to the undiscerning eye, though soul-destroying if you actually have to live it. In many rural areas of Suffolk, where I now serve, poverty is disguised by beautiful countryside and coastlines, yet exacerbated by poor transport connectivity, remoteness from educational opportunities, and the dominance of seasonal employment. While there's certainly inequality and division, both are often quite hidden, and there's nothing that looks like an estate, or not that kind of estate. So why does this matter? Well, the language that we use reveals how we regard each other. And work to develop the vocations of people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds must proceed with accuracy and nuance of language and understanding. It needs careful examination of the barriers and enablers that operate in relation to class, culture, education, ethnicity, as well as the many other intersecting factors. So please, as has already been said, don't let's make assumptions about what a working class background looks like. Roles, gifts, and experiences differ. And talking about living on estates doesn't really help to convey those nuances. So let's use better language to help change our attitudes and our culture, and to enable people of every background to enrich the whole body of the church. Thank you.
Rob Sutherland, Diocese of Leeds 132, thank you very much for calling me. I'll try and keep this to 3 minutes. We had a fringe meeting about this a few days ago that Alex had called, and there was a question that really made me realise what is going on in the Church of England when it comes to this. What is the fear working class people have about the Church of England? And I don't want to just pontificate about myself, but my experience is that 20 years ago, I was taken to Matalan by my middle-class wife and bought a dressing gown for my upcoming trip to Hogwarts for BAP. And then I also then had my DDO, Sue Penfold, who is a life-changing person who I have known, who told me what to expect. Rob, you drink one beer in the bar and you go to bed, which is a very different experience to the mining community that I grew up in. And my experience of governance, I can confirm that General Synod is very different to my first experience of governance when I was elected to the committee of the Working Men's Club. And on the day before I started college, I had a fraught phone call with Sue about me in a flap. I was talking about totally changing my appearance. And she said, in her life-changing human being kind of way, Rob, God called you, not someone else. If you do that, you will never be you again. My first service as a curate came with the phrase, that was weird. It was a bit like going to church, but in Broad Yorkshire. Spit and polish. Make it so Rob can get through selection. Make it so Rob can get through college. Make it so Rob can get through curacy. Make it so that Rob can have canapes, whatever they are. Yes, if you read the reports, that's me. I'm the one who said, what is a canape to my wife, and she fell about giggling. And it is now the real life experience of other people. I minister on, I'm sorry to say it, an estate. I have a young ordinand who has got himself to college. He's navigated it, but it's not the only conversation I've had about vocation. If you can't see yourself being part of something, then you can't see yourself being part of that. My presence in the community has shown people that they can be part of it, but 2 conversations came with hurdles that were too big to jump over. Not that they were even placed in the way, it was just that they'd been spotted on the horizon. We now have a language to agree that we should be enabling working class vocations, but now we need action. We need the support structures put in place to support people on the first steps of vocational journey, and all of the things to support going through college. I checked with Alex that I could say this. At the Fringe, Alex said, "We're not asking for the Archbishop of Canterbury," and I disagree. Inclusion should not come with limitations. One day, I hope to be sharing an Iceland prawn ring with whoever is resident of Lambeth Palace, and I'm sure that there will also be a tray of canapes over on the side for the people who need it. Please support this motion.
Thank you. I'm now looking to Zoom. Can I call Rachel Mann and then David O'Brien? Speech limit is still 3 minutes.
Rachel Mann, 171 Manchester. Thank you for calling me, Chair. We don't know what you're going to say next. You know, the C of E has put me through some pretty curious experiences, including sending me to see a psychiatrist before selection for ordained ministry, simply in virtue of me being transgender. The report said if only more candidates had thought about their identity as much as Rachel. But the thing that sticks with me most is a repeated refrain as I've tested out my call to various roles. We don't know what you're going to say next. And then it clicked. It was being said because I didn't play by the middle class rules of the game, because that's not how I was trained to be in my wonderful rural working class childhood. Being in senior leadership as a person of working class heritage has been a curious experience. I've been fortunate to be part of a bishop's leadership team where difference is celebrated, but my radar for what I call BS has caused a fair few sharp intakes of breath. But good teams are diverse teams, and we need development programs which can build confidence in working class leaders to take on senior roles, but without turning us into people we're not. But we also need development and training for those of the classic Anglican backgrounds too, to learn how to stop being freaked out by people like me who say surprising things, unexpected things, to celebrate rather than tolerate the radical perspectives of people like me with working class heritage. We need to learn to honour working class giftings. The poet Emily Dickinson said, "Tell it slant." Well, working class people tell it slant. Well, I do anyway. It comes from growing up in a noisy family where the house was too small for all of us. To be heard, you had to be yourself. And to make sense of the world, you learnt to read the language of TV and films rather than books about the famous five and their lashings of ginger beer. A final thought. You know, I've received very little prejudice about being trans from working class people and among working class Christians, when I've often had a pretty rough time amongst more middle class Christians. Why? Well, because working class people and Christians just know what it is to speak from a place of precarity and edginess, where community is not shaped by position and power. It's a perspective from below. And don't believe that all working class people are bigots and racists. That's just not how it is. But we do offer a disruptive perspective. Dare I say, a Christ-like perspective? So let's celebrate working class lives and ministry. And I think we will find Christ more alive among us. Synod, let's crack on and support this motion with everything we've got.
Thank you. David O'Brien.
Thank you for calling me. I'm fully in support of this motion. David O'Brien, Blackburn 069. How do I begin? I'll speak from my heart. It's the best way. So my dad was an alcoholic, and that left my mother destitute to bring up 6 children by herself. So life was interesting growing up, and then I had a very dramatic, life-changing encounter with the Holy Spirit when I was 22. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I've been ordained 22 years this year, this Petertide. And when I first began the vocations process, one of my brothers turned around to me and said, Church of England, is that a bit posh for you? And I'll leave you to decide whether that was true or not. I'm currently vicar of a parish in Blackpool, and out of over 12,000 parishes in the Church of England, this is the 10th poorest according to the stats from the Church Urban Fund. I take the cure of souls seriously, which to me means that everybody in England should be given the opportunity to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Jesus Christ who saved me from a background where I look back and I just couldn't imagine that I'd be a vicar, and I couldn't imagine I'd even be a Christian growing up. And to do that, to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to this nation, we need all the gifts of the Holy Spirit. That means we need all the people of God. And that means we need to remove any class barriers that stop people going into the ministry for which God calls them to do. Because the priority is to bring Jesus to this nation. So I support this motion because hopefully by God's grace, it will remove unnecessary barriers and enable people with the right giftings to be called to the right ministries, regardless of what their background is. So thank you.
I call the Archbishop of Canterbury and then Claire MacArthur. Thank you.
Sarah Mullally, 001, Canterbury. Thank you, Chair, for calling me. I want to welcome this work that has been undertaken for us to understand and to address classism in the Church of England. I particularly want to thank Alex Frost for his ministry, but also for having brought that private member's motion. And Bishop Lynn, we are so grateful for the challenge that you give us, and we know that you will continue to hold us to account. We have heard that there is much to do to bring down the barriers, and we need to ensure that we continue to hear from the voices of those with working class experience, but also to ensure that they co-produce solutions with us. Many potential ministers, including some from working class backgrounds, have experienced disrupted or limited prior education. We've heard how this is not an indication of their lack of ability or calling, and we do need to take steps to improve them to follow their call. I am very proud of the work of the Peter Pathway at St Mellitus, but still listening to those candidates that have gone through that process, they still talk about how our processes and expectations continue to be barriers to them. They still believe that we do not get it. Financial pressures continue to deter candidates from lower income backgrounds. There have been recent improvements in the stipend, in pensions that will help. There are the forthcoming changes in ordained maintenance, which are to be welcomed. But we do need to continue to listen to the very specific problems of people in lower incomes that creates a barrier to them exploring vocation. Around 27% of the UK workforce, that's 8.7 million people, regularly work evenings and nights, including many potential lay and ordained ministers in our churches. Our current processes exclude shift workers, and we need to do more to ensure that our vocational processes are accessible to those outside traditional working patterns. Their experience brings gifts to the church that we urgently need if we are going to be the church that we are called to be. And Chantal, I absolutely agree with you. We need to allow people to grow into the vocation for which they have been called. And Rob, an invitation to a prawn ring from Iceland at Lambeth Palace. Thank you.
Claire MacArthur, Coventry 98. Thank you for calling me. I support this motion. For some of us, vocation did not begin with encouragement networks or inherited confidence. It began with survival. I grew up in Coventry in a working class family marked by domestic abuse. Church became my sanctuary, the place where I first knew that God loved me and had my back. I went because it was the one place where I felt held, seen, and safe. That shaped my faith long before I had words for vocation or ministry. I remember meals that had to stretch, hand-me-downs. We laugh in my family about sharing half a yoghurt. We grew up a little feral, left to our own devices, lots of my friends living through the realities of the miners' strike at the local pit. We all attended the local comprehensive. It wasn't neglect, it was making do, learning limits, fairness, how to look out for one another. We knew no different. The irony is I was deemed posh in my area. I worked from the age of 14. On leaving school, I applied to the BBC because they provided a hostel for their staff. My teacher said I'd never get a job there, but somehow I blagged my way. I arrived in London with £265 and, importantly, a place to say that I was safe. My resilience kicked in. I worked hard and got on with it. By 28, I was an established senior leader at the BBC. I helped create the BBC's first digital platforms. I attended Ashridge Business School. Most days, I led the online desk for the whole of England. And yet, when I discerned for ministry, I was required to prove that I was academically adequate. My HR department had to write a reference confirming that I would cope with studying. How patronising is that? As a family, we struggled financially all our life. When I said I could not afford to go to residential training while raising 3 children and being the main breadwinner, the response was, perhaps your vocation is as a mother. I wrestled with doubts that I was an imposter. I had lack of polished church language. Every time I drove home from my BAP advisor, I cried because I was made to feel thick. During my discernment, my prayer was, God, if this is your will, make it happen. I went to Queen's for 3 years, still working full-time, working 15-hour days, travelling 55 miles on a Tuesday evening, on a college pathway that is deemed by some of my colleagues now as second-rate. I was required to sell my house. You learn to adapt. My children laugh at my church voice. My story is not unique. I know a priest who was required to take elocution lessons to soften her accent. Others who have been denied opportunities because of their class to lead, whereas we've watched the middle-class male colleagues move into roles without safer recruitment. I know a priest challenged for wearing hoodies and trainers, and a common refrain is, I worry that you're not acting or speaking in a way that's becoming of a clerk in holy orders. You can't ordain people who have grown up speaking and dressing in a certain way, who have life experience that are often gritty rather than polished, and then expect them to behave like well-to-do people who were raised with wealth. I know that I am a good priest. If you just let me finish. I minister in the poorest deanery in Coventry. I live in the real world. I understand it, not as a theory, but as a lived experience. We are not a problem to be solved, we are a gift. We must be trusted and we must be invested in and given equal opportunity to move up the ranks and, importantly, accepted and never judged. We need to change our culture. Thank you.
Yes, point of order.
Point of order. I'm sorry, you'll have to help me. I'm not sure which standing order it is, but we keep hearing from clergy. We haven't heard very many speeches from the House of Laity, and I'm sure that isn't on purpose, but I just wanted to raise it.
Thank you. Although that isn't a point of order, I will take note of that. Thank you. Can I call Bishop Rose? And Andrew Gray. Thank you.
Thank you for calling me. 2026 is the year. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Rose Hudson-Wilkin, Bishop of Dover, number 43. It is 2026, Synod members, and yet we are still having this conversation with regards to how and who we choose to lead within our church as lay and ordained. I want to suggest to us that I believe the reason we are here at this point discussing this is because we have simply not learned from the past. We recently spoke of the 40 years of faith in the city. Believe me, when faith in the city came out, they were also wrestling with this kind of issue. And so we have to ask ourselves, when are we going to learn? Or in 20 years' time, even if our sister Lynn isn't presenting at the podium, whether somebody else is going to be saying the exact thing again. My brother who spoke first mentioned about lowering the barrier. I don't want us to talk about lowering the barrier, because when we do that, it's as if we're saying, well, working class people can't get to that height, so we'd better lower it for them to jump over it. No, we can get to that height, and we have risen to that height. It's just that you're blind and you can't see that we are there and can do and understand the task. What we need is to have the right goalpost in place, flexible goalposts, goalposts that has core and flex, goalposts that allows us to value and respect what everybody brings to the table. It is my hope and my prayer that we will all start expecting each other to explore their vocations as lay or ordained leaders within our church. And this is not just for the special boards, for all of us. When you go back to your diocese, to your parishes, look around you and ask amongst yourselves, who amongst us might God be calling? Let's get out of our camps and our labels that we carry and wear, because what that does is simply asking us to collate more people who look like us and speak like us. We need to go forward within our church. And if we're going to do that, then we need everybody in the room and at the table.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yep. Andrew Gray, Synod Ipswich 399. And I realised that I look suspiciously like one of those people who shoot grouse on the estate, as my diocesan bishop referred to. I just wanted to draw our attention really to a point, really to point C, and it's really a question for the bishop on this motion. Obviously, I welcome this motion. It's fantastic. I think anything that encourages vocations can only be a good thing, and the wider the pool that we can draw from, the better, particularly in that sort of diversity of talents. But I want to focus on the question of resource. And I think this has extra poignancy because we just heard from the Archbishop of Canterbury about the fact that people who do shift work would often be excluded from thinking about going for vocation. And we heard from Claire MacArthur about the importance of investing. So I really want to focus on this question of resource, because in item C on the motion, it says we call on the House of Bishops to address structural and cultural barriers to the flourishing of working class ministers and their ministry at all levels, etc. And I guess my only concern is this, really. I think this is a great piece of work. And we can really hopefully encourage, as I say, a much wider pool of talent to come forward for vocations. But the question is, will there be enough paid stipendiary roles at the end of it? Or are we in danger of having a last mile failure where we effectively encourage much wider ministry only to find there aren't enough paid jobs at the other end? And I say that because obviously you only have to open the Church Times to see the same thing. House for duty, house for duty, house for duty, house for duty. Now, that's a structural problem because clearly the only people who can afford to do that are people with independent means and independent incomes, and that will exclude a lot of people. And my concern as a church is that we are drifting with a lot of our clergy into the same sort of space as magistrates. We expect it to be purely voluntary. So my question really on this motion is, are we going to put our money where our mouth is? Not just in terms of the process of encouraging more people to come forward and resourcing it, but making sure that there are enough paid stipendiary roles at the other end. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call Nigel Bacon and Nicholas Levy, please? Thank you.
Nigel Bacon, Lincoln 342. Thank you, Chair, for calling me. I serve as a bishop's advisor on in the ministerial discernment process. I can tell you, it is always deeply humbling to learn of the life experiences of candidates coming forward. It is deeply humbling, the experiences that they have had in earlier life, and particularly so in the case of those coming from working class backgrounds. But on those panels, we can only recommend those who enter the discernment process. So it is vital that we remove any and all barriers that stand in the way of people responding to Christ's calling. So I totally support this motion before us. I also serve on TEI quality assurance review panels. And just very occasionally, I get to meet, during a quality assurance evaluation, someone who has been on one of those panels and which I have had the privilege of recommending for training for ordination. And I can think of one particular individual who stands out in my mind, who's certainly self-identified as working class. And what a deep joy it was to see him thriving for ministry and certainly thriving in training for ministry and certainly well on the way to ordination and exercising a ministry that will bear much fruit in fruitful service. Please support this motion.
Nicholas Levy, Southwark 220. Thank you, Chair, for calling me. I welcome and support this motion. A priest approached a young boy on the street and said, "Could you tell me where the post office is placed?" The boy gave him the direction, and the priest said, "Thank you. If you come to my church tonight, I will tell you how to get to heaven." "I don't think so," said the young boy. "You don't even know how to get to the post office." As a church, we have a lot to learn, not least from our working class communities. In my previous ministry as a youth worker and church army evangelist, I worked with youth and young adults in Belfast, Bradford, and in the borough of Greenwich, mostly in a working class context. I learned so much and saw God moving powerfully, with many coming to faith. However, I noticed that people from this context are usually underrepresented in our churches, especially in leadership role. When I spoke about vocation or pursuing ministry, they often think it wasn't for them, because the Church of England is often perceived by people as a middle-class establishment. We need to change that, and we can do so by intentionally investing in working-class communities and by encouraging and offering opportunities for vocation and leadership in the church. Let me tell you a quick story. When I led the Church Army project in Southeast London, one of my volunteers came thinking that all she could do was to give tea and coffee and just do the basic stuff. I noticed that she had a calling, so I encouraged her to go to Sheffield to Church Army's open day. She was reluctant, but I pushed her and I encouraged her. She went, and to cut the long story short, she was able to train for 4 years, and as I speak today, she's a Church Army Commission evangelist. She was commissioned as a lay minister in our diocese. When I moved on because of ordination, Church Army appointed her to lead the project, and today she's happy leading this project in Southeast London. I believe we should not be erecting barriers that make people feel they are unqualified to serve simply because of where they live or because of their socio-economic status. Rather, we should be asking how we as a church can move beyond our nice speeches and numerous reports to support and encourage indigenous leadership among working class communities across our country. If we are going to grow our churches and reach all people, we will need both the middle class and the working class working together in the mission of sharing the gospel and bringing many to Christ. In Southwark, we have the Magnify program led by the Dean of Estate Ministry. It seeks to train, equip, and raise leaders in our working class communities. And as a priest, I'm always encouraged by Acts 4:13, look right. When they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. Synod, let's do all we can to support ministry, vocation, and raising of leaders from our working class communities to serve in God's church. Thank you.
I now wish to test the mind of Synod on whether item 22 has been sufficiently debated. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Thank you. That's carried. So I now ask Bishop of Chester to come and respond to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mark Tanner, Chester 12. Synod, I am deeply, deeply moved by this debate, and I'm really grateful for all the stories. And if I can cut to the blunt northern chase, the question is, what are we going to do about it? So we as Ministry Development Board and the teams with whom we work on are utterly committed to take this forward. One of the things I have learned as a minister, particularly working around questions of racial diversity, is the value of reverse mentoring. So Nicholas, I'm so grateful for everything. I can't see where you are, but I'm so grateful for everything you've just said. I want to know more about the Magnify program, because to my shame, I didn't know about that from my northern outpost, but it sounds very valuable. How are we going to listen and learn and enable ourselves to be taught across the intelligence spectrums? Because there are different types of intelligences, and we need all of them. Just to work through some of the amazing speeches, for which I'm very grateful. Andrew, I think yours was the only question. Yes, there will be enough stipendiary clergy. At the moment, we are going to run out of, there are going to be enough posts for stipendiary clergy. At the moment, we're going to run out of people before we run out of money. So please do encourage vocations, both lay and ordained. We need them, and if there aren't jobs in the south, guess what, folks? Come up north. A number of you picked up, so I noticed this with Nigel and various others, this sense of joy. And although I weep as I hear Claire's story, and she highlights for us just the depth of the challenges we still need to overcome, please don't think this is a problem that we're trying to solve as if we're making others a problem. This is a joyful opportunity. And yes, we need to repent, of course we do, because we've got things wrong and we have wounded people. But this is joyful fellowship, and we will be immensely enriched if we take this seriously and move forward. Archbishop Sarah, I'm grateful for much of your own I can't say the word, pioneering in the Peter pathway. That's like one of those tongue twisters. And the work that you've done with St. Mellitus and other programs around the country. These things really, really matter. The improving of the work around ordnance maintenance has been really vital in terms of how we address these financial challenges. Claire, you talked about the church being a safe place, and that's another beautiful example of the kind of intersectionality of this work, as work in one part of our life together, which is an essential reflection of our nature before Christ, also then enriches and supports work in another part of our work together. I could go on just working through the speeches. I do want to mention Adams and thank him for his eloquent and moving debut speech, which really matters. 2 jobs ago, I had the privilege of running the Vicar Factory in Durham. I was warden of Cranmer Hall, where we trained Anglicans and Methodists. My friend Calvin, who headed up the Methodist part, occasionally stopped me and thanked me for what he called the effortless superiority which we Anglicans exuded. And he always meant it, as kind friends do, with a depth of kindness, but with a deep profundity. Friends, let's not be effortlessly superior in this debate. We have much to learn and much to receive. This is not a cost to the church. This is an investment in our future, and we believe that this motion is going to help us better reflect and then better serve our nation. I do just want to come to Alex Frost, though. Alex, I hadn't realised this was your final time in Synod. We owe you a huge debt of gratitude for putting this work formally on our agenda. I agree with almost every word you said, except your support for Burnley Football Club. Because following my grandfather, I support Brentford, and on the 28th of February, we will be on opposite sides of that particular debate. But my friend, we are on completely the same side of this one. Synod, I hope from the tone of this debate that our vote is going to be unanimously in favour, and I urge that. But please, let your voting be a prayer. Let it be a lifting of holy hands in worship and not merely an exercise of human will or power. Let your prayer be a humble commitment. We must do better. We must go further. We must learn. We must glorify Christ. And we must be the church that saves, or one of the churches indeed, that serves this nation. Please support this motion.
Thank you. I now put item 22 to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? Thank you. That item is carried. Thank you, Synod.
Synod, we're almost there. We come now to the draft National Minister Register regulations. Members will need the draft regulations and GS 2436 and the explanatory notes GS 2436X. Notice has been given of 2 amendments to the code. In a moment, I shall call upon the Bishop of Coventry to move the preliminary motion that the National Minister Register regulations be considered. Should that motion be carried, we will then take the amendments each in turn, after which we will then move on to the motion that the code be approved, amended or not, as the case may be. So I now call the Bishop of Coventry to move item 505A, that the National Minister Register regulations be considered. And Bishop Sophie, you have up to 10 minutes.
Sophie Jelly, Bishop of Coventry, 014, Lead Bishop for Lay Ministries. Those who were members of Synod during the last quinquennium may recall that back in November 2020, approval was given to the National Ministry Register clergy regulations. These paved the way for the introduction of the National Register of Clergy. On that occasion, the then Bishop of Bristol assured the Synod that the second part of the work on a National Ministry Register in relation to lay ministers would follow and be presented to Synod in due course. This is now what I present for your consideration and, I hope, approval. It is inconceivable that the Church of England could sustain its mission and ministry without its abundance of lay ministers. Part of supporting lay ministries is ensuring that ministry is exercised as safely as possible. These regulations support that intent by continuing to implement the underlying rationale in the recommendations of the Gibb report through a publicly accessible register of lay ministers in nationally recognised roles. Members will see from the draft regulations that they cover the following type of lay minister. A deaconess authorised under Canon D3, B, a reader or licensed lay minister authorised under Canon E6, C, a licensed lay worker authorised under Canon E8, D, a lay person specified as a leader in mission institution under Part 7 of the Mission and Pastoral Measure 2011, a BMO. These categories provide clarity in a context of diocesan variation. So while both the term reader and licensed lay minister or LLM are used by different dioceses, both relate to anyone authorised under Canon E6. Similarly, there will be many titles for people licensed as lay workers, and all will need including. I appreciate that many dioceses have local lay ministry roles, which are often given a form of permission to exercise that ministry from the bishop. Their ministry is deeply valued, and a valid question is, why are they not included in this national register? Well, the rationale has been carefully considered and includes safeguarding considerations as well as legal ones. To support good safeguarding, we need to have a high level of confidence in the robustness of the data on the register, provided by clarity as to who needs to be included on it. From a legal perspective, to comply with the provisions of the primary legislation, the category of lay minister to be included on the register must be capable of being recognised nationally, and the authority granted must be recognisable in law. That's why the category of lay minister is limited to those who either appear in the canons or in other ecclesiastical legislation. Local variants would fall outside of this scope. So how will the regulations work? Like the clergy register, the information for inclusion on the register will be provided by a registration officer, which in this case will always be the bishop of the diocese. Whilst the responsibility to ensure that the registration information is provided rests with the bishop, it is permissible for the bishop to direct that task to be undertaken by another person, for example, the warden of reader/LLMs. The draft regulations require that within 5 working days of them coming into force, the registration officer must provide to the Archbishop's Council the name of the lay minister, the form of authority the lay minister holds, the area or place where they exercise ministry, and whether the authorization is subject to any limitations of time. The information will then be published freely online. If the authorisation of a lay minister in a nationally recognised role comes to an end, they will no longer show on the register, which only shows current authorisations. There could be all sorts of legitimate reasons why lay ministers are not included in the register, from taking a temporary break at retirement to be waiting for their permission to be renewed. At the point when the new authorisation takes effect, they will appear again in the register. Equally, there will be circumstances where, for safeguarding or other reasons, a person's authorization is suspended or terminated. In these circumstances, the regulations ensure that the person is removed from the register within 24 hours. And how will the register envisioned within these regulations work? Well, the good news is that we already have a clear and workable path for creating a national register of lay ministers. Most dioceses use the same contact management system, which securely holds information about people, their roles, training, and safeguarding checks. 2 national trials have shown that dioceses can, with minimal effort, align their local role titles with agreed national definitions. Once this is done, their data flows automatically into a national list and stays up to date as local records change. For the small number of dioceses not yet using this system, we will provide a light touch version so that their information can be added easily, either through simple manual updates or using existing digital connections. The main challenges ahead are ensuring that every diocese records are complete and current, and that the necessary work can be done in good time. But importantly, the new lay ministers register will sit entirely outside the people's system and the clergy register. So no existing national system or data flows need to change. Our aim is for a straightforward, secure, and reliable way of showing who is authorised to minister in a nationally recognised role within our church today. In terms of data protection, because the register is created under measure, we have a clear lawful basis to proceed and to process and publish this information. The data involved is deliberately minimal. No additional personal details are collected or shared. As with the clergy register, this ensures that we meet our legal obligations while keeping the amount of personal data handled proportionate, transparent, and securely managed. While the register is intended to provide clear and nationally consistent information, it's also important to recognise that there may be rare and exceptional circumstances where the publication of specific details could place an individual at risk. In such cases, where there's good and demonstrable cause, for example in situations involving domestic abuse, the general principles of administrative law allow for a proportionate and considered response. This might be reducing the level of detail shown on the register by recording a minister's area of authority simply at diocesan level. In exceptional circumstances where the need for confidentiality is clear and compelling, the relevant details may be withheld entirely. The existing legal framework already allows for such decisions to be made where justified, ensuring that the register remains both accurate and safe while respecting the duty of care owed to those who serve. Finally, there are 2 amendments proposed to the clergy register contained in Regulation 8, which I wish to bring to your attention briefly. The first is a small technical amendment to remove any doubt as to whether the national register is fully enforced in all dioceses. The present position under the 2020 clergy regulations is that the Archbishop's Council was required to send a request to each diocese to provide their initial information so that the register could be compiled. Whilst that did happen in many cases, a question was raised about whether that was the case across all dioceses. Regulation 8(2) and 4 amend Regulation 4 of the 2020 regulations by changing the trigger for the specified information to be provided by the diocese. Instead of that being triggered by a request from the Archbishop's Council, the requirement now takes effect from the point at which the 2020 regulations came into force on the 1st of May 2021. I'm nearly there, Synod. The second change relates to clergy who are granted authorisation to minister for less than 14 days. This is commonly the case where clergy from abroad visit England for a specific service or occasion. An exception to the duty to provide registration information in these circumstances is now suggested in these regulations. The National Safeguarding Team worked closely with our national ministry and legal colleagues to establish a safe framework for clergy who are seeking short-term authorisation for ministry, less than 14 days, as is common for visiting ministers from overseas. They believe the agreed approach is proportionate means of managing any potential safeguarding risks and are content with it as a way forward. Synod, the work on the National Register of both lay and ordained ministers arose out of an imperative to make our church as safe as possible. These regulations are the next steps in that important work. Our lay ministers are a vital part of our ministry ecology, and I seek your support for this significant development. Thank you.
This item is now open for debate. The speech limit is 5 minutes. Call Nigel Bacon, followed by Jamie Harrison.
Nigel Bacon, Lincoln 342. Thank you, Chair, for calling me. Way back in the July 2018 group of sessions, in the course of a safeguarding debate, I, as a reader, argued that readers and other lay ministers who hold the bishop's license, or PTO, should be held to the same high standards as clergy. Later in that same group of sessions, Synod debated the first consideration of GS 2104, a miscellaneous provisions measure that, amongst other things, legislated for the introduction of the National Clergy Register. It also allowed regulations to be later made by Synod that would extend registration to those others authorised to exercise ministry. Consistent with my earlier comments in the safeguarding debate, I urge that the measure be strengthened so that laypersons licensed or holding PTO for otherwise licensed positions must be included on a national register rather than may be included. Both I and Clive Scowen, a fellow reader, later made submissions to the Revisions Committee to that effect, and we were pleased to see them incorporated in the measure when it was finally passed. I willingly agreed at that time that priority should be given to establishing the National Clergy Register. But despite my promptings by means of questions at Synod, I did start to wonder whether a National Lay Ministers Register would ever emerge. It is consequently with great delight that I now welcome the regulations before us and urge Synod to approve them. I also fully support the amendments to be proposed by Clive to extend the range of those to be included in the register, and which I see will be highly pertinent within my own diocese. As I indicated at the start of this speech, all of us who minister, clergy or lay, must be held to the same high standards of safeguarding, and national registration is an integral part of that. Please, Synod, support this measure.
After Jamie Harrison, the Dean of the Arches. Thank you.
Jamie Harrison, 301 Durham, Mr. Chair. I'm very grateful for this coming. It's taken a little bit of time, but it has come. And for Nigel's prompting has been really helpful. I think it was, you may have heard a reference to Dame Moira Gibbs' report from 2017, which was called An Abuse of Faith, and had the recommendation at recommendation 11 to set up a national clergy register, particularly those with PTO. It was a report on Peter Ball and all that had heard around Peter Ball. So this has come out of safeguarding. And I was approached soon afterwards by the then clerk of the Synod, Jackie Phillips, to consider how this might go forward. And we've heard about the 2018 discussions. My own particular interest at that time was I was quite involved with NHS England. I'd been recruiting a lot of doctors from Europe, and we were very concerned that when they came on to work in the NHS, they would be on what we then called the performers list, a parallel national register of GPs who could work in an NHS context as general medical practitioners. So I'd had to face this regulatory process from that angle, and was therefore very aware of the value and importance of such a register. And without it, it was very difficult to know whether the person, the doctor concerned, was actually eligible to work and was also up to speed on things like their training, particularly around, in that case, their DBS checks and their willingness to have other forms of training. So it seems right and proper that we should now move to this, having, in a sense, put it into the principle of the 2020 measure, but realising it would take time to get the clergy register set up before we moved to a lay register. And of course, eligibility is critical, and that's where I think I may have to struggle with Clive and his amendment. What we had with the doctors was very clear who had a medical degree and other things. They could sit quite clearly in a box. The difficulty we have, of course, with laity is that they are licensed, is clearer, but other forms of authorization are less clear across the dioceses. And I think that's where we may have to tease out in this debate whether we really feel that's feasible and whether it's workable. Because the most difficult thing actually is to keep such lists up to date. I was shocked some years ago when I checked the register, this is a long time ago, when I discovered that someone who was suspended was still on a register. So I think that's the challenge for dioceses. And the numbers are pretty huge in relation to those who are authorized. So I do welcome this and ask us to support this direction of travel and to vote it through. It will be a challenge, but I believe it's a challenge we can face, particularly over those who are licensed. But as I say, I'd like to hear the debate on those who are authorised so that we can decide whether we think it's both clear enough, workable, and what we need. Thank you.
The Dean of the Arches and Angus MacLean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I speak in favour of the motion, both as a lawyer and as a licensed lay minister. Last June, I had rather a big midsummer weekend. My eldest son got married near Chichester, and the same weekend, I had the daunting task of giving a paper on 1700 years of clergy discipline in celebration of the Council of Nicaea and its canons, and there was a serious risk that this might have had to be given in the presence of His All Holiness, the Ecumenical Patriarch. Fortunately, he went to a more interesting paper, not mine. I found myself, therefore, doing some fascinating research about the early church and was struck by the fact that there was already, by the date of the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, a canon or register of clergy. I remarked in the lecture that it had taken nearly 1700 years for us to catch up. Leaving history aside, the register is hugely important for safeguarding reasons. One of the lessons learned from the appalling history of John Smythe is that it was not clear whether or not he was an authorised reader, so that he appeared to some people to have more authority than he actually had. We lay people who are privileged to be formally licensed to contribute publicly to the mission and ministry of the Church should be transparently identifiable as part of the Church's public accountability. And yes, I managed to do sustainable flower arranging for my son's wedding reception last summer, as well as give the lecture. Thank you very much.
After Chris Angus, I'm going to reduce the speech limit to 3 minutes. And yes, please.
Chris Angus, 265, Carlisle. There's actually another group of people who are authorised to exercise a lay ministry at times, not always frequently, and that's church wardens. And particularly in rural areas with numbers of parishes gathered together, we often find ourselves actually taking services. But interestingly, we're not covered by these regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. After Lucy Doherty, John Wilson.
Lucy Doherty, Portsmouth 385. Thank you for calling me. I won't take 3 minutes. I'm just curious. I have a question to ask. Forgive my ignorance. I've just tried to find out something about Canon D3 whilst I was in the chamber. I want to know if we still have lots of deaconesses left in the church. My dear mother was ordained, I don't know if that's the right word, a deaconess when she was finally allowed to exercise her faith and her calling, and gladly laid down her blue cassock when finally the church agreed that she could move on and become a deacon. And I've never heard of anybody since then calling themselves a deaconess. And I'd just like to know, please, are there still lots of people who are deaconesses? Because I find it quite strange that point A is about deaconesses, and I thought that that no longer existed. That's all. Thank you.
And after John Wilson, yes, please, sir.
John Wilson, Lichfield 341. Thank you for calling me, Chair. I didn't anticipate speaking, but this might be the last time I get an opportunity to speak here at Synod in London. I wanted to build a bit on what Chris Angus was saying earlier about another group of people. And whilst I fully support what we're doing today, there are another group of people which have what you might call a public-facing role. And those are people like area or rural deans, lay chairs of deaneries, and diocesan lay chairs. Now, currently, there is nowhere where you can actually find out who is the area dean or rural dean or the lay chair. Or perhaps with some dioceses, you can find out about the area or rural dean, because some actually do put it on their websites. It's unlikely you'll find any details of the deanery lay chair or often the diocesan lay chair. Now, it works differently across the whole country. If you were somebody like me, for example, with the National Deanery Network, wanted to find out and contact the lay chair or area rural dean in a particular deanery, it's very, very difficult. So perhaps now we've got this one sorted, we can perhaps look at this other group of people. Just a little anecdote, because often I write to diocesan lay chairs and ask them if they could send me a copy of their, the current copy of their rural area deans and lay chairs, so that we can keep them up to date with the work that we do. I won't say which diocese, but I had one diocesan secretary write back to me and say that I'm very, very sorry, but we can't release that information because of data protection. However, if you spend £15 and buy the diocesan handbook, all the information's in there.
Ian Boothroyd, Southwell and Nottingham 422. Thank you, Chair. I should say I have a personal interest in this as a reader for whom the passage of years means that I no longer hold a license. And can I say that the weight of the years feels quite heavy at the end of this very, very long week. But this question of the ministerial register is new to me because it predates my time on General Synod, but what a good idea. But can I please ask for clarification as to why people in my position and other similar positions are not to be included, and just give you a bit of an argument why they might have been. Why does it refer to Canon E6, which is specifically about the licensing of readers? And I note that Jamie talked about authorization, but it's authorization by means of a license as a result of that reference to E6, and not E5, which refers to the admission of readers, at which point it's recognized that national standards have been achieved, a calling is recognized, and that's worthy of a record, as well as, of course, as ensuring our accountability because we remain on the register. And I had a quick look at the clergy regulations, and that appears to relate to clerks in holy orders, with whether they have the form of authority to exercise ministry being part of the information rather than a criterion for being on the register. So it seems to me the result may be that people like me will not appear on the register at all. And I think that's regrettable. I also wonder about whether it's right that readers should come and go off the register as they move between dioceses or between parishes. They will be in and out and then in again with the sort of beginnings of a hokey-cokey with the register. So could I ask why that has not been done, why it's not E5 admission rather than E6, the licensing of readers, so that we can be more fully covered in the register? Thank you.
Madam, yes, please.
Thank you. Nicola Denyer, 368 Newcastle. I'm really pleased to support this item that has been brought to us for consideration today. Back at home, I am a lay ministry development officer, so I spend my time talking to people and enabling vocations. I'm also a reader myself, so this is kind of stuff that I'm really invested in. For the same reasons that I spoke in the safeguarding debate earlier this week, it seems like weeks ago, doesn't it, when we had that debate, when I was talking about the need for good governance and oversight and clarity, this is exactly why I would support this and urge Synod to support it too. I spend a lot of my time with locally recognised and authorised lay ministers, I'm also a member of the Lay Ministries Network run by the National Lay Ministries team, where people in my roles and roles like that meet together. It is really hard at present to talk about authorised lay ministries in terms that people from different dioceses understand, because they're all called something different. So where some dioceses will authorise, some will locally recognise, it is impossible at present, I would argue, to have any kind of clarity and completely confidence in adding people at that level of lay ministry, as valuable as they are to their local parishes and dioceses, to this kind of register. I just don't think we're there yet with tracking people and even knowing what they're called, because it's different everywhere. So I don't think we can do that yet, but I certainly think that doing this for readers and for other recognised lay ministers, licensed lay ministers, that move nationally is about safety and about clarity and about good governance. Thank you.
I see no one else standing, so I'm going to invite please, Josie Munro. There now.
Josie Munro, 493. I'm only here really to ask a question with regard to lay ministers. We have a class of ministers called pioneer ministers who can be lay or ordained, and I wondered if they were caught within this list, and if they're not, we should really move towards that, because they do have a public ministry and they may well be leaders in their own parishes. Thank you.
I see no one standing, and therefore call the Bishop of Coventry to reply to the debate. Bishop Sophie, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Synod. Can I just thank you so much for your dedicated attention to this detailed proposal at so late on in Synod. You really are the faithful and not the traitors. I'm so grateful. So I'm just going to recognise the complexity and diversity of working in the lay ministry space, which is my privilege to have done for almost 3 years. Nigel, thank you for your reader ministry in Lincoln and for your comments that hold us to as high a standard across the mutuality of lay and ordained ministers, and thank you particularly for your work in helping us to reach this point today. Jamie, thank you very much for reminding us of the utter importance that the fact that this is strongly rooted in our safeguarding concerns and our shared commitment to work towards a safer church for all. And may I particularly mention, as you mentioned, Peter Ball, and John Smythe was also mentioned, particularly the victims and survivors of those dreadful cases, both those who are living and those no longer with us, and pay tribute to them. And I hope that this work will be a legacy for them, which honours them in that way. The Dean of the Arches, I'm so glad that you were giving that talk and not me, but thank you for reminding us of our rich roots that go all the way back to Nicaea, and I feel honoured that this registration in some way links us with our history as Anglicans. Chris Angus from Carlisle, I just want to pay a big tribute to church wardens. They do such vital work as lay ministers across the Church of England. Where would we be without our amazing church wardens in this particular situation? Lucy Doherty, in answer to your question, we don't know how many deaconesses there are still, but actually in creating this particular register of lay ministers, we will find out potentially. We do know, however, that Bishop Viv Fall, whom I mentioned, began her ministry as a deaconess, and so it seems very fitting that I should mention her in response to your question. John Wilson, a really good mention there of the work across deanery memories and the recognition that sometimes we want to be able to engage with each other in those particular ministries. Thank you so much for drawing our attention to this, which kind of falls slightly outside of the scope of our work today, I think, but we certainly will take note in the lay ministries work and see what we might be able to do about that. Ian Boothroyd, another reader, thank you for your ministry. Just a couple of clarifications in regard to what you raised. It is only clergy who are in active ministry who appear on the clergy register. So when you talk about those who would be on the register simply by virtue of being reverend, that is not actually the case. And also in terms of lay ministries, though you rightly mentioned the canons in relation to lay ministry, again, it's the license which actually is the permission for a person to be able to minister in public ministry as a reader LLM, and therefore that's the relevant part for this registration. Nick Denyer, thank you for the work that you do in the North East, and also for recognising the complexity of the space in which we work when we talk about the diversity and the richness of lay ministries. We certainly want more diversity. It's a very creative particular ministry to work within, but you did acknowledge actually the complexity, therefore, of widening the scope of this register at this time. And then, Joe Seal, in answer to your question, if a pioneer is a licensed lay worker, they would appear on the register. If they are a pioneer but not a license, they don't operate by license, they would not. So I hope that's clear. So thank you very much for the contributions. I hope that the debate can continue as we move to the next stage, but thank you very much indeed for your contributions. They're really welcome.
I now put item 505A to the vote. This will be by show of hands and green ticks, red crosses on Zoom. All those in favour? Any against? That is carried. We now move, Synod, to the first of the amendments, and I call Mr. Scowen to move his amendment to item 560. Clive, you may speak for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Clive Scowen, London 358. Nigel Bacon very helpfully referred in the last debate to the origin of this business, which is in safeguarding. As he said, he and I both put in submissions calling for a lay register to be added to the requirement in the miscellaneous provisions measure of 2020, in addition to the clergy register. As it happened, I also served on that revision committee and was able to influence the decision to include the lay register alongside the clergy one. Confess it never occurred to me that it would take over 5 years longer to get the legislation for the lay register in place than it was for the clergy register. But the underlying rationale of having these registers is that anyone who can hold themselves out as authorised by the church for ministry should be able to demonstrate that that is indeed the case, and that anyone who wants to know can check whether such a person does indeed have the authority they claim. Now, of course, much lay ministry is authorised on a very local and often undocumented basis, and it'll never be possible to devise a system to enable every lay person exercising ministry in or on behalf of the church to be registered. But in the last 30 years or so, a variety of ministries have grown up which are authorised in writing by bishops, including in addition to the canonical categories of deaconess, if there are any, lay worker and reader. They go by a variety of names, such as evangelist, commissioned minister, children's worker, families worker, youth worker, worship leader, service leader, preacher, pastoral assistant, and pastoral visitor. But that diversity of naming is not a problem, provided you can identify the essential character that they all share. Now, again, a lot of people with such role descriptions are not authorised by the bishop, but a lot are. It seems to me that those who are authorised in writing by a bishop are readily definable. Surely any competent bishop and bishop's office should have a record of those to whom they have given written authority to minister, just as they do those to whom they've granted a license. If we're serious in the interests of becoming a safer church, about maximising the number of authorised ministers who are entered on the register, we will include lay people who have been given written authority from their bishop for their ministry. Bishop Sophie referred to paragraph 5 of the explanatory note, where it says many dioceses have local lay ministry roles who are often given a form of permission to exercise that ministry from the bishop. And then it says this: to comply with the provisions of the primary legislation, the category of lay minister to be included in the register must be capable of being recognised nationally, and the authority granted must be recognisable in law as an outward sign of the bishop's confidence in the person to exercise ministry. Now, with the greatest respect to the author of that note and to Bishop Sophie, who quoted it, I cannot see where that limitation comes from. The paragraph refers to the provisions of the primary legislation, which is section 2 of that miscellaneous provisions measure. But I can find nothing in that section about it having to be a nationally recognised ministry or recognisable in law. Section 2(1)b simply describes it as a person who can be included in the register as a person who has authority of such description as the regulations may specify to exercise ministry in the diocese or other place or area or place concerned. As for the authority granted being an outward sign of the bishop's confidence in the person to exercise ministry, what else could written authority from the bishop be? Now, what I've been describing is actually Amendment 561, which is the essential one. 560 is consequential in the sense that it just gives an extra year to form this bit of the register, recognising the amount of work it's likely to take. So, Chair, I do invite Synod to approve these amendments.
I invite the Bishop of Coventry to respond.
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to respond. I want to thank Mr Cowan for his amendment and particularly the commitment that it demonstrates both to lay ministries and to safeguarding. As I've already mentioned, safeguarding is of course foundational to this work, as it is to all ministry, lay and ordained. However, though this sounds a good and worthy suggestion, and I am content to hear Synod's views, I cannot support this amendment for the following reason. The register being proposed is a national register. Those who are licensed as lay ministers may exercise ministry in other dioceses with appropriate permissions and processes having been followed. They are discerned and trained using national frameworks and licensed under canon. This means that a receiving diocese can check the register to ensure that a reader or LLM is in good standing. The effect this amendment would be to widen the scope of the register to include any layperson who's authorised in writing by the bishop of a diocese or a suffragan bishop of that diocese to exercise ministry in the diocese or in a particular community. Ministers who are authorised as part of diocesan schemes would have no expectation of ministering elsewhere, as diocesan schemes are all independent of each other. There's no sense in which these roles are national and no shared understanding across dioceses of what it is to be an authorised lay minister. For any member of the public checking this register, this is likely to generate confusion rather than clarity. The definition sounds simple, but it's too broad to be implementable. The National Lay Ministry's context, as I've said, is diverse and complex, and each diocese has its own understanding of what authorised lay ministry constitutes. And although having written permission from a bishop sounds clear, what of a diocese with an authorised lay ministry scheme where the written permission is from the incumbent, but ministers are commissioned by the bishop in a diocesan service and called authorised? Within the intent of this amendment, they presumably should be included, but by the definition they would not be. Definitions of ministry are also broad. Would a head teacher to whom the bishop has written with permission to lead a retreat therefore be added to the register? As outlined in my opening speech, from a legal perspective, to comply with the provisions of the primary legislation, the category of lay minister to be included on the register must be capable of being recognised nationally, and the authority granted must be recognised in law. A lack of clarity in the definition would result in confusion for those in dioceses tasked with implementing it. The integrity of the data as a whole would be risked if people who should be included aren't, and those who do not need it to be included are added. This undermines the clarity required if the safeguarding benefits of the register are to be realised. If the data within the register as a whole is not trustworthy, then the benefit of including those categories of lay ministers at points A to D become diluted. We've consulted with the National Safeguarding Team. They agree with that legal position. So given the lack of formal definition of authorised lay ministry, it would not be appropriate for all people involved in this to be on the register until a collective understanding and expectations of the role have all been agreed. And although 2 years feels like a generous implementation period, my personal experience of lay ministries across several dioceses and across the breadth of the Church of England within my role as lead bishop for lay ministries is that we are not in a place where a shared definition could be reached within that time frame, and all the additional required data gathered from parishes by diocese. The National Lay Ministries team are currently commissioning research into authorised lay ministry across the Church of England in order to explore what national guidance and frameworks might be offered into this complex space. I would welcome the opportunity to report back to General Synod on that work in a future group of sessions and explore what might be done nationally to support good practice in this area. However, in the meantime, I urge Synod to resist this amendment for the reasons I have outlined. Thank you.
The Bishop has indicated she is willing for the debate to continue, so item 560 is now open for debate. The speech limit is 3 minutes. Charlie Screen, followed by you, Madam. Thank you.
Charlie Screen, London 164. Thank you for calling me Chair. The clergy register is a fantastic thing. Our parish frequently has one-off services with national clergy involved. It has made life so much easier. A lay register would be so helpful, but I'm afraid I do not support Clive's additional proposal. I found Bishop Sophie's opening speech convincing legal and safeguarding reasons and what she has just said, and I don't see the equivalent practical need for this. If the licence is local only and informal, then the chance of them arriving at my parish holding themselves out as licensed to serve, while in fact barred for a good safeguarding reason, seems to me to be close to zero. I also notice that even the administration of Holy Communion, which Clive excludes, also has safeguarding implications. So I think this will just make it so broad as to be unworkable. Thank you.
Jenny Bridgman, Chester 88. I have two conflicts of interest to declare on this item as a member of the Lay Ministries Advisory Group and as a Diocesan Director of Ministry. And I'm trusting it won't be deemed out of order to speak to both amendments, as the first is consequential on the second. So I recognise and share the concern behind these amendments, but I cannot support them because the wording of the second one under item 561 is too vague to be workable. Of course, ministry exercised in the church must be safe and regulated and accountable. But the wording in this amendment is unclear. Where safeguarding depends on clarity, this introduces ambiguity. The draft regulations are tightly defined. They refer to offices recognised in canon law and authorised by the bishop. That clarity makes implementation possible and reliable. The amendments, however, refer to anyone, quote, authorised in writing to, quote, exercise ministry under, quote, informal arrangements. Those phrases are extremely wide. Some lay ministers are authorised or commissioned by bishops, others by incumbents and PCCs. Some permissions are formally recorded, others are by local letters or emails or rotas or role descriptions. Some are centrally logged, but many are recognised at parish level. Incidentally, this doesn't mean their ministry is unregulated or unaccountable. And it's important to remember too that the oversight of lay ministers at diocesan level is often carried out by very limited resource, sometimes by part-time or voluntary wardens of readers or similar officers. Extending the scope of this to cover every locally authorised and informally recognised role would create a significant administrative burden in systems that, however competent, are already stretched. The Lay Ministries Data Project in 2020 identified around 2,000 distinct role titles among roughly 40 categories of lay ministry. Even within clearer licensed categories, achieving consistent data is complex. The more local and informal the authorization, the less complete and reliable the central record. If we broaden the scope of this without clear definitions, then 42 dioceses will make 42 interpretations. Even with the high-quality support which is already being provided by the National Lay Ministries team, data will be uneven. Compliance with reporting timelines cannot be guaranteed. A register that appears comprehensive but rests on inconsistent definitions risks creating false assurances. Systems only make us safer when they work. A process that cannot be implemented consistently will not increase safety, it will diminish it.
Could I ask members to remain standing if they wish to speak in favour of the amendment? Is this in favour?
A question that might make me think in favour. Andrew Dodgson.
Go on then.
Andrew Dodgson, 208 St Edmunds Green and Ipswich. During the debate, someone's raised the question of church wardens. I was just wondering if a church warden isn't covered under this amendment, someone who holds a bishop's license of some kind.
So I'm minded just to take one more speech and then test your mind on a closure on this amendment. Stephen, no, sat down again. Debbie Buggs, thank you.
Debbie Buggs, London 353. I wonder if I might be able to out-Clive Clive on this one. Chair, under Standing Order 29, you can vary the order in which we hear amendments, and that is also a power given to you under Standing Order 15. So I wonder if we can perhaps vote on the substantive item 561 before we vote on the consequential one, please.
Was that a point? Is this a point of order?
No, it's not a point of order. It's a speech with a suggestion.
In that case, I don't have to do it. I don't have to do anything. Synod, I wish now to test your mind on whether item 560 has been sufficiently debated. I'd therefore like to put the motion for the closure on item 560. Those in favour, please show. And those against. That is carried. So I now invite Mr. Scowen to respond to the debate on the amendment in up to 5 minutes, if you need it.
Scowen, London 358. If I may, just a couple of comments on speeches made. I accept Charlie Screen's point that the chances of the sort of lay minister I want to add turning up at his parish wanting to be recognised is probably small. Much more probable is that somebody who claims to be a commissioned minister or a youth worker authorised by the bishop may turn up at a school or some youth club that's not run by the church and say, hey, I've got the bishop's authority. And if he hasn't, or she hasn't, we have a problem. And it's important that anybody running a club, school, should be able to check that. Jenny Bridgman talked about ambiguity and lack of clarity. I really don't understand what is unclear or ambiguous about authorization by a bishop or ministry. The fact that these people have different titles doesn't come into it. It's the essence of the authority that they've been given by the bishop. So, Chair, I don't regret bringing this motion at all, this amendment at all. However, it's utterly clear to me that nobody's going to vote for it. So I can see no purpose whatever in putting it to the vote. So if I may, Chair, I will withdraw it. But I do hope that the essence of the point I've been making will be taken seriously by the National Lay Ministry team, and that, as Bishop Sophie hinted, that actually it will in due course lead to some fruit.
Thank you, Synod. I am advised that the question, the motion to put the question has been carried, so the question must be put. So I do invite you to vote on item 560. Those in favour? And those against? That is lost. I therefore ask Mr. Scowen to move his amendment at item 561, again with up to 5 minutes.
Well, Chair, that was incredibly generous of you, but in the circumstances, I do not wish to move 561.
Item 561 not being moved, I therefore call upon the Bishop of Coventry to move the motion at item 506B, that 505B, beg your pardon, Synod, 505B, that the National Minister regulations be approved. And Bishop Sophie, you may speak for up to 10 minutes.
Fear not, Synod, I do not need 10 minutes. I do want to say thank you to the faithful remnant for staying to the bitter end of this debate, which is, as we've already recognised, is very important indeed, particularly for safe practice for all our ministry colleagues across the Church of England. I would just like to thank those who have spoken of their experience and demonstrated their commitment and dedication to the high standard, the quality of the ministry which we exercise, and particularly the development of lay ministries across the Church of England, which I already have expressed as a vital component of our ministerial ecology in the life of our church. Thank you to each and every one of you for the part that you play in that, whether that affects you personally or whether you are enabling the ministry of others. Mr. Scowen, I would like to thank you so much for your efforts and the spirit in which you offered those amendments. And I do want to assure you that the lay ministry team really would like to work with you on seeking to find a way forward so that we can continue to ensure safe and best practice for lay ministries for the future years ahead. We want to see more lay ministers practicing safely, not less. So please let's have that conversation. I do want to remind Synod that we're doing something which has already been supported in Section 2 of the Church of England Miscellaneous Provisions Measure 2020. So this is really making good on a commitment already made. And it is about supporting a church that's as safe as possible and implementing the underlying rationale in the recommendations of the Gibb report. I think it's appropriate that I mention that this is a team effort. It's my utter privilege to work with a dedicated group of colleagues. So I would especially like to offer my thanks to the Lay Ministries team and especially the head of Lay Ministries, Carrie Myers, who does much of this work unseen all year round and has helped us to achieve an incredibly high standard of lay ministry, the like of which we didn't have just very few years ago. So thank you, Carrie. Alongside her are other colleagues in her team, which gladly, with the support of Archbishop's Council, has been able to expand, so there isn't just one of her anymore. There's a few more, but not many. And also to the Lay Ministries Advisory Group. You heard from a few of them today, and we're really thankful for their work and guidance and wisdom as we seek to ensure this best practice. And I would pay tribute to my co-chair, my colleague Paula Gooder, who would be here as a guest but is on sabbatical, a well-earned sabbatical in Australia at this time. And a huge thank you to the National Safeguarding Team and Data Services and the Legal Office. This has been a collaborative effort for which I am truly grateful. Finally, once again, thank you. It's been a great opportunity to celebrate, recognise and thank the thousands of lay ministers who are faithfully serving their churches and communities within the Church of England. So I move that the National Ministry Register Regulations 2026 be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Item 505B is open for debate. Please, speech limit is 3 minutes.
Adrian Greenwood, Southwark 415, and I am a reader in that diocese with PTO. I was a founder member of the Lay Ministries Advisory Group, and this issue of the National Register was something that we grappled with over a number of years. The vision for the National Vision for Lay Ministry, which Carrie Myers developed early on, is demonstrated in the picture of a garden in which many, many different plants flower. And it is my personal belief from the study of Scripture that every member of a local congregation has a ministry. We call it every member ministry. And that for the whole body to flourish, we need every member to flourish in their particular ministry. So in coming up with a national register, it is quite clear that we can't, well, we could, but it would be very impractical to have every single member of the Church of England on it. So we have to devise a balance which is guided by the underlying objective of achieving a safer church, but is realistic in terms of administrative efficiency. So I think we've got the right balance here, and I hope that you will support this enthusiastically. Lay ministry is a vital part of our church, as Bishop Sophie has said several times. Just to remind you from the Setting God's People Free report of 2017, 98% of the church are neither ordained or in lay ministry. And it's the fundamental role of ministers, whether they be lay or ordained, to enable that 98% to flourish and to fulfill their God-given potential in serving the church and the world. Thank you very much.
Sam Wilson, yes please.
Sam Wilson, Chester 282. Thank you for this. I think this is going to be absolutely brilliant. I think we've heard already today about various groups of lay people who won't be included in this, and Clive listed many of them. Can I ask that as Bishop Sophie and your team, you look at possibly expanding this, that might require legal changes, could you have particular focus to children, youth and families, ministers like me, because I think because of the nature of our work, we should absolutely be included on something like this. Not that I'm saying that the other different groups aren't important, but I think when it comes to safeguarding, we really should be the priority. Thank you.
And after Bob Chambers, Clive Scowen.
Bob Chambers, Chichester 288. Thank you, Chair, for calling me. And thank you to Bishop Sophie, for others involved, and thank you also to Clive for his proposed amendments. I've heard in the course of the presentation and debate this afternoon reference to the safeguarding concerns that we collectively have as a church. It's no secret that we have had failings in the past that have damaged individuals beyond our full comprehension and damaged the reputation of the church as well. Could I please just state for the record that legal complexity, operational complexity are not sufficient impediment for us to stop short of anything other than the highest possible standards of safeguarding. That's what we seek to introduce and apply consistently across the church. I know that, I believe that to be true of all of us here at Synod. That's what we have committed to repeatedly. Could I please just therefore underscore what I think I've heard already, that efforts will continue to explore how we can most appropriately ensure that those who are authorised in whatever form, at whatever level, carry that authorisation in such a way that it cannot be misconstrued, misapplied in such a way that it might cause others harm. Yes, we need to make sure that it's legally enforceable, operationally that it is practicable, but I think our commitment to that at a principle level is something that we as a church and the wider world need to hear from us today. Thank you.
Clive Scowen, thank you.
Clive Scowen, London 358. Chair, I just want to pursue something that was raised by another speaker in the first debate that we had in this cluster. Which is whether the regulation, in referring to licensed lay ministers and licensed lay workers, also includes people with permission to officiate. Now, according to the note, explanatory note, it says the reference to authorised in B and C includes both those who have been licensed by the bishop and those who have been given written permission to exercise ministry under those categories. I understood that to mean that those who, for whatever reason, were lay ministers with PTO, as distinct from a license, were included on the basis that the essence of the ministry is that it is one that is capable of being licensed. I also just wanted to draw Synod's attention to a joyful piece of news which emerged from one of the very late questions on the question paper, which of course we never reached, which was that I am now given to understand that the House of Bishops has approved a new scheme whereby readers stroke licensed lay ministers who reach the age of 70 can remain licensed. This seems to me to be very good news indeed, not least because the concept of an unlicensed licensed lay minister seems to me to be absurd.
So if Bishop Sophie in her reply could confirm that understanding on both those points, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Synod, I am minded to test your mind on the closure of this item, whether item 505B has been sufficiently debated. I therefore put the motion for the closure. Those in favour, please show. Those against? That is carried. I therefore invite the Bishop of Coventry to reply to the debate in up to 5 minutes.
Sorry, I want to be, Sophie Jelly, Coventry 014. I was just making sure that I was totally accurate for you, Mr. Scowen. I will do my best. Just in response to those contributions, just to finish, I'd like to say thank you to Adrian for his long-standing commitment to lay ministries and reminding us of the image of the garden, which I think is a good way to finish Synod, is it not, having been in this room for quite a lot of hours. Sam Wilson, just to say that if children, youth and families ministers can be licensed, and in some dioceses are, and also the 30,000 project, seeking to double the numbers of children and young people at this time, is considering how we might take that forward. It's a live conversation at this time, so thank you for bringing that to us. Bob, I can only agree with you really that our highest commitment to safeguarding still stands, and no complexity should dissuade us from that, and therefore we continue with this work in the best way that we can. Mr. Cowan, you raised the question in terms of the question we never got to, and the regulations. Thankfully, after 25 years, the regulations around reader licensed lay ministry have now been reissued as guidance, and there is a 2-year implementation period in which the PTO will be removed, and we will be given that 2-year period for dioceses to decide about the licensing of lay ministers. Some dioceses have already dispensed with that, but the key thing here is that authorization can happen either by license or by written permission by a bishop in this case. So you are indeed correct. So I hope that makes that clear. So thank you very much for this contribution to this debate, particularly so late on in the day in Synod. I'm really grateful for this, and thank you, Chair.
I therefore put item 505B to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Those against. That is carried. The regulations will now be referred to the Archbishop's Council and, once made, laid before Parliament under the Statutory Instruments Act 1946. Synod, that concludes this item of business.
Synod, we have made it to the end of the week. Thank you for your contributions in the last 5 days, and particularly for the tone in which you have shaped our discussions. I'd also like to thank all the support staff for having made these last 5 days happen. We are very grateful indeed. Before we head off, on your behalf, I want to place on record my thanks to both Martin Warner, Bishop of Chichester, and Stephen Croft, Bishop of Oxford. I always know if Martin Warner has arrived before me at a meeting.
There are two signs. The first one is that neatly in the corner there is a folded bike, much shinier than mine. And secondly, I always hear his infectious laugh, which seems to carry across the room. One of the many gifts of Bishop Martin is his passion for people. He is warm and pastoral and cares deeply for those in his care. This has been a theme of his ministry, whether in parish life, at St. Paul's Cathedral, his work at Walsingham, or in his roles as bishop. Martin's desire to see people grow in their knowledge and love of Jesus Christ has ensured that laity and clergy alike are empowered to be ambassadors for God's kingdom here on earth. Bishop Martin has transformed the Diocese of Chichester and has, with a steely determination, ensured that safeguarding practices are resilient and embedded in the life of the diocese. In addition, Martin has been an active member of the House of Lords and has represented the Church of England at the Synod on Synodality in Rome in 2024, which I know was extremely appreciated by those participating in the event. Martin, we want to thank you for all that you have done in the life of the Church during this chapter of your ministry. As you begin to complete your time in the Diocese of Chichester, please be assured of our love and prayers for you and your future ministry. Bishop Stephen will be laying down his crozier at the end of May, having served 10 years as the Bishop of Oxford and 17 years as a diocesan bishop. We are indebted to Stephen for his wisdom, care, and focus, and all that he has given to us over his time in the Church. Throughout his ministry, the furthering of God's kingdom has rightly been at the heart of all that he has done and of his calling, whether it was as a diocesan mission consultant, training and forming ordinands when warden of Cranmer Hall, when in the role of the Archbishop's missioner and team leader of Fresh Expressions, or during his time as the Bishop of Sheffield and subsequently Bishop of Oxford. Stephen has also been an extremely active member of the House of Lords, contributing and advising around data ethics and artificial intelligence, to name just two areas. We have witnessed at this group of sessions his contribution to the ongoing work around living in love and faith. And we have observed in multiple gatherings the patience and gentleness in which he has always been present, and his desire to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Stephen, this is not goodbye, but farewell, as you continue to seek God's guidance for your future. We are grateful for all that you have done as a disciple of Christ. As you and Anne continue to walk the path ahead, be assured of our prayers for you. In the name of God, Amen. We, Sarah Elizabeth, by divine providence, Archbishop of Canterbury, do now prorogue this synod to and until the 10th day of July 2026, subject to the powers exercisable by the presidents under the Constitution and standing orders of the synod. Go forth into the world in peace. Be of good courage. Hold fast to that which is good. Render to no one evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the afflicted. Show love to everyone. Love and serve the Lord, rejoicing in the power of the Holy Spirit. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, be with you and remain with you always. Amen.